Welcome back. In this video, we're going to give these orange blobs a attack so they can actually interact with the player. Right now, the blobs will chase us, but they don't actually attack us, which is a little disappointing for an enemy. So let's dive into giving them a melee attack. So first up, in making a melee attack for the blobs, we need essentially an invisible hitbox. We could like do a circle around the blob and detect any actors within that circle. But I'm a fan of actually just making like a hitbox appear, and if that hitbox hits the player, then damage is registered. So in order to make a hitbox, I need a shape of a good hitbox. So I'm going to import a new shape object from our assets. So let's create a new sprite. I'm gonna load the red circle. So this will be SPR underscore red. Well, I've been calling them spheres, but I'll call this one circle. And then go to import. We want to go to our shapes and just pull up a red circle. Now, this circle, as far as resizing goes, this is going to be a little bit too big. So I'm going to drop the size down to 48 by 48. And then check the collision mask. I'm going to do automatic ellipse, and I'm going to center it. And I don't need to make any other changes. So I can close that. So we have a graphic for what we're going to use to make a invisible hitbox appear. It also really serves as a good debugging feature. We can actually see the attack going out, so that'll be nice. We could create it under enemies if we want, just to kind of keep things from having too many folders. So I'm going to create a new object, and this is going to be object underscore enemy underscore melee. And this is going to be where we don't put a lot of code in it, but this is going to be the object that basically holds the information about the enemy's attack. So we want to link it to that sprite. So we want to give it that red circle. Eventually, we're going to uncheck visible because we don't want to see it, but for now, we probably want to see it for debugging purposes. It will need a few instance variables. So I'm going to give it an exist duration. And exist duration, just how many frames this thing's going to hang around for. I mean, you could do one, but I think 5 seems kind of reasonable. We need a damage. And it can start at 0. That's fine, because we're going to assign the damage when the enemy actually spawns this. Same with knockback. It will just let it default to 0, and again, we will assign a value to that. And then stun time. Also, we'll just leave it at 0. We just want to have these instance variables so that they're guaranteed to exist. We don't accidentally crash or anything weird like that. Then we need an end step that will eventually clean this thing up. So we need to add an end step event. And this is going to count down and delete objects. So we're just going to do exist duration minus equals 1. If exist duration is ever less than or equal to 0, then we are going to destroy this object. Pretty straightforward. It's a simple counter so that this thing will eventually disappear. And that's all we really need to do with this. Most of the interaction about the attack is going to be handled on the player side. The player is going to register the collision, and some of the information about the stats will be assigned by the enemy. So we do need to start getting the enemy to want to spawn the attack. So let's go into the object enemy parent. And I do want to add a few variables because we definitely want them to make the attack a little bit better. So we've got an aggro range, but we don't really have like an attack range. So we kind of need to think what that's going to fall under. I think I'm going to just call it attack as kind of the prefix here. So we need an attack range melee, and we could just give it a default of something like 60. Then we need to assign the damage here so that we can actually choose what stats. So the damage for the melee attack, we could make it, let's go 15. Attack melee knockback. We can do maybe 14. Attack melee stun, and this is how long the player gets stunned for, and we can do 12 for that. And then we need some stuff to handle the cooldown effects. So we need a attack melee cooldown. How often can this, how many frames in between attacks can we attack with? So let's go with, maybe let's try 20, maybe it's 10 for now. And then we need some kind of counter that tracks if we can attack yet. So I'm just going to call this AI underscore attack cooldown. So this is whether or not we're allowed to attack yet. So a few variables. So we've added these ones here, starting with the attack series. Oops, this says, oh yeah, attack range. That's the distance we can attack at. So one thing we need to tick down that cooldown. That's going to be an end step thing. So right after our hurt, we will decrement our AI underscore attack cooldown. If that is greater than 0, then we will just kind of steal this same code here to subtract 1 from it. Make sure I spelled this thing right. Okay. That warning always makes me cautious, but I just think that's GameMaker taking its time, recognizing that it's an instance variable. I don't know. Okay, so we need to go about actually spawning this attack. So the thing is, I think that it might make more sense for us to get the attack set up inside of the enemy that's going to do the attack. So I want this to be a responsibility of the orange blob. So in the orange blob, I'm going to actually override the step method and then give it the logic to determine if it's going to attack. So the step method normally controls our movement and other things. So by overriding this, we're still going to do this, but afterwards we're going to attempt to attack. So if we jump over to the blob, we want to create a new step event. And it'll turn white instead of gray. And this step event is going to be call parents, step, and melee attack info. So this is going to be where we handle all of our attacks. So we still need to call the object enemy parents step method. So we do that by saying event underscore inherited. That makes sure that it still runs all of the code from up here. So all of the code for this step event is going to get run. And then we want to put the code that's unique to the blob here. So I'm going to kind of write the logic for how the blob is going to determine if it wants to do the attack or not. So there's a lot of conditions that I want to check for if it's allowed to attack. So if slain is, and I think that's stats slain. If stat slain is false, and stat stunned is less than or equal to 0, and attack enabled is true, and attack AI attack cooldown is less than or equal to 0. So if all 4 of those conditions are true, then the enemy can attack. So if you're not dead, if you're not stunned, if you haven't disabled your attack for some reason, and if the cooldown is up on whether or not you're allowed to attack. I know, it's quite the if statement. So we want to check to see if there's a player inside the game. So let's get a... We only wanted to attempt attacks if the player exists, because if the player is defeated, we don't need to use attacks. So we'll say if global.manager.data_player. So that'll get a reference to our players if that's equal to no one, not equal to no one. So if there is a player in the scene, then we would allow this creature to attack. So to make things easier, we're going to get some data. So calculate player stuff. So stuff relevant to determining if we can attack or not. So var player equals global.manager.dataPlayer. So just an easier variable, so I don't have to say global.manager.player every single time I want to access the player. Let's get the distance. Var player distance equals point distance. And we could do it from this creature, so from this enemy's X and Y to the player's X and Y. And then we want to get the angle, so player_angle, and that is point direction from this creature's X and Y to players. And so that's going to determine how close the player is, or what direction the player is in. So that way we know which way to point either ranged attacks or which direction to point our bite effect. So now we want to put some code for like if we're going, what attack we're going to do. So we want to determine which attack to use. So I would put normally the melee attack is a shorter range than a range attack. So we would put the condition to check for the distance of the player. So if player_distance is less than or equal to attack range melee. So we would check for that first, then we would go into an else if for like a ranged attack. So that would be something we would explore if as we in a later video when we start adding some ranged attacks, so that a creature could technically have both. If you are far enough away, it will ranged attack you. And then if you run up on the creature, maybe it has a more powerful or maybe a weaker melee attack, depending on the creature. So that, there's some tactical choice for the player. If the player wants to stop a really powerful ranged attack, you get really close to the monster so it can't make that ranged attack. So we want to actually do the attack. So let's trigger the animation, play the attack animation. So that's calling our custom animate method. And we want to call it in the direction of the player. So we need those numbers. So we need to do length direction X, and we'll just use a unit vector, player angle, comma, length direction Y, unit vector, player angle. And we want to trigger the animation state of attack. So while this seems a little bit complicated here, all this is doing is basically making a unit circle and converting the player's direction into just numbers. So we're just trying to figure out, if the player is right here, and our blob is, this is our blob, that this direction to the player, if the x is like a bigger component, so like this might return 0.8 for the x and 0.2 for the y, it's a more, the player is more to the right than the player is above us, so we'll want to choose the right facing sprite. That's basically what this code did, is that it's just kind of doing like unit circle computations of what the x and y component is with a given angle. And so that's what that's for, to figure out which direction to play. Then we want to lock the animation so that it doesn't like switch us to the walk animation right after. So anim locked equals true. And then I don't want the attack to immediately appear, because that's not really fair to the player. I want to give a little delay before the attack actually spawns. So we will say, we'll use the GameMaker's alarm system. So the alarm system is a built-in timer, basically. And so by saying alarm bracket 0, there's I think like 10 built-in alarms. Annoyingly, you can't like rename them. It's just going to be called alarm 0. But we can just acknowledge that alarm 0 is for when it's time to spawn a melee attack. So alarm 0, we set it to 30 frames, and it will automatically count down those 30 frames, and then the event will fire for alarm 0. But we'll go put that in the parent, since spawning an attack is kind of a generic behavior, makes more sense to be in the parent. And then we want to disable the attack so that the enemy doesn't continue trying to attack while there's an attack pending. So since we're waiting 30 frames, I need to remember what that variable is called. Oh, it's attack enabled. I think there's a, yeah. So we don't want to try to trigger another attack while there's this attack pending, hence this part here. Because we're going to wait 30 frames before we attempt to spawn the attack. The monster's not stunned, the monster's not dead, the cooldown hasn't triggered, so we just want to turn off the ability for it to try to attack. So let's jump back up to the parent. And let's add the code for that attack to actually go through. So we want to work on alarm 0 now. So we're going to add an event. We're going to add alarm 0. And this is the melee attack trigger. So we want the attack to actually go through if we are not stunned and we are not, oh, it's stat stunned. And we are not slain. So if those conditions are true, then we are allowed to spawn this attack. So we'll re-enable animation. We'll say anim locked equals false. We will re-enable attack. So attack enabled equals true. Then we actually want to spawn the attack, and we want to spawn it at the player. So we want to bite in the direction of the player. So we're going to spawn this little red circle kind of towards where the player is. So let's do if global.manager.dataPlayer is not equal to no one. And we're going to grab some of this standard stuff that we were using. Instead of retyping it, I'm just going to steal it from here. We want to recalculate all that player information. So then we want to attack where to spawn this bite effect. So we could create a variable for how far the reach is, and that might make the most sense. So we might need to add one more attack variable here, attack melee reach. And this is just how far does the attack, like how far from the center of the creature does this attack appear? So we want to calculate the position to spawn the attack at. So var x position equals length direction. So we're componentizing a vector, basically. So attack melee reach, comma player angle. Doing the same thing for y. So that calculates the position to spawn this thing at. Well, it's kind of more of an offset because it's, you know, this x position could be negative because we're calculating it kind of on a unit circle type of thing. So then we'll just add this to the current position of the enemy. So the attack, var attack, equals instance underscore create layer x pose plus x, comma y pose plus y. So the current creature's x and y position plus the offset. Spawn it on the instances layer. And we want to spawn an object enemy melee. Then we want to set the damage. So we'll say attack dot damage equals attack melee damage. And we're going to have to go through all the different variables. So we have to do knockback, attack, melee, knockback. And the reason we're doing this is because we don't want to hard code this. I just want to inherit all of these traits into any enemy that I create in the future. So I don't have to recode this for any number of enemies. The blob can define its own set, and then when we have an air elemental, it can define its own set of values for this. So we'll set the cooldown, AI underscore attack cooldown is set equal to the attack underscore melee cooldown. Now this next part is optional. You can stun the enemy for like a tiny bit right after they attack. The reason you would do that is so that there's a slight pause after they either hit their attack or they whiff their attack, giving the player a chance to kind of retaliate. So otherwise the enemy will finish its attack and immediately go back into chasing the player or launching another attack. So the idea is that this kind of like gives you a window to counterattack. So you could consider like multiplying this by 2 for a longer window, which would make the game a little bit easier. If you just eliminate this line altogether, the game's a lot harder because the blob has no chill. The blob will attack and then immediately start moving, then attack, and then attack. With no like windows in between that. You would require like near perfect timing to hit it. So this gives the player a window to react to that. So with these changes, it should work. We won't have, it won't hurt us, but it should, spawn, and we should be able to see it. So you can see that that little circle is kind of tracking me, depending on where I'm at. And if I get out of the way of the monster, it has a little moment where it kind of waits after it attacked. If I didn't have that stun in there, it would immediately start moving again right after it made its attack. And I might need to, like, because it's actually technically easier to dodge when you're above it. I could maybe make the position it appears at slightly offset a little bit. Because if you recall, the center, the point of origin of the monsters is the feet, like the very bottom of the blob. So that does kind of create a little imbalance in like its attack. If you like notice that the origin is right here at the bottom. So that's the point where this attack is, the circle is spawning from, and the distance is being calculated from. So, nah, I know that's kind of just a thing. Don't know what else to say about that. It's a design quirk. Okay, so this seems pretty good. Our enemy is launching attacks at us, and that's what we want. Now, we do need to do a little maintenance here with the enemy. So we need to add a animation end step. And this is just to don't loop the attack animation. So if anim state is equal to anim state dot attack, or anim underscore state equals anim state dot slain, then set the animation to the last frame. That way it won't loop through its attack animation, which would look kind of silly. Or when it's defeated, like if it has a death animation, it won't loop through the death animation the whole time. So that's just a little thing that will save us some headache down the road. So now we want to get the attack to affect the player. And that's not going to be really that hard to do. So, oh, actually we should, before we jump to the player, we should interrupt the attack whenever we get hit. So we have this to do here that says cancel attack state. And if the attack goes through, if we get hit, we shouldn't, like, we need to... Oh, my cat is not happy about that. So essentially it would say alarm 0 equals 0, so that empties out the timer, so it prevents the triggering of that alarm event that we just created. I know a little bit of foreshadowing. The ranged attack's going to use alarm 1, so we'll just do that. Then we will unlock the animation, and we will re-enable the attack because the enemy just got hit, and so when it was waiting for it to spawn the attack, it wasn't allowed to attack. So those are the changes we need to make to this getting hit by the sword code. So let's also go make that change to getting hit by the arrow. Let's see, do I need to make any changes to begin step? No. So I could probably, once the player is within or once the enemy is within the melee range, um, we might want to stop moving. So if player distance is less than aggro radius, chase the player. Um, but we also probably want a case where if the player is within the melee distance, we should just stop. So let's do else if player distance is less than attack. Oh no, this is yeah, actually it's attack melee range. Or attack enabled is false. So we don't want to move. So the enemy will stop moving if it has an attack pending, or the player is within the enemy's melee range. It won't try to chase further. It'll just sit there waiting to attack. So we'll say AI target X equals X, AI target Y equals Y. So that way it won't go and chase. The other thing is when we actually do successfully attack, we should probably turn off super aggro. So if we manage to attack, um, we will say disable super aggro because we got to attack. So we'll just say AI super aggro equals false. So if the monster gets close enough to bite us, it's happy. It will if we manage to run away from it again, it will stop chasing us. All right, so we can test those changes just to make sure that everything is working. And actually, it's probably good that I just tested those changes. Um, oh, attack melee range. Um, and that is on my step. Oops, begin step. Um, what was that variable called? Oh, attack. Wow, I really feel like I should probably reorder that, but I'm cringing on the inside right now. Ah, fine. We'll just reorder this. So it's consistent. So that we'll eventually have attack ranged range. No, I guess. So that means we need to update the blob code instead. So if we jump down to blob real fast, we just have to change that to attack melee range. And that should make it happy again. So now the blob actually stops when it's winding up an attack. Now, that's up to you if you think the attack comes out too quick. If you think that the blob's bite is too fast, you could up the time inside of this alarm. So this alarm of 30, you can maybe bump this up to like, if you really want to make it slow, 60. And what you would see is you'll have like a whole second instead of half a second to dodge its attack. So it does chase us a little bit. In there. Um, hmm. Something a little bit kind of sus about that. Oh, this chase is overriding um, my decision making. So maybe we need to reorder this. So let's move this one to the front, move this one to the else. So if it's within the melee range, we stop. Or if attack is enabled as false. That's not true. Then we look for the player. That might make a little bit more smooth behavior here. Yeah. I feel like my animation has got the frames wrong. Interesting. Oh. Oh. +1, -1. Some wonderful typos here. I'm sorry for that. So I mean, that's that 60-second delay. So again, if you feel like that delay is too much, you could bump that back down to 30. So that's good for the enemy side. Now we just got to do the player getting hit, and we will be done with this. So the player getting hit's actually pretty simple. So inside the player, we need to react to um, getting hit, essentially. So we don't have a hit list yet. So a track of how many projectiles have hit us. So we need, this is what, 3-3? No, 3-4. So we'll call this already hit equals ds list create. And because we're creating a new list, we do have to address it in cleanup. So in cleanup, we do need to destroy lists. So we'd have to say ds list destroy already hit. Now we can interface with getting hit. So we can add a collision. So we'll have a collision with a object enemy melee. And so we'll just first we want to check to see if already hit by that object. So if ds list underscore find index already hit, comma other dot id. So that's the idea of the thing hitting us. So if that's equal to -1, that means we have not been hit by it yet. And so we want to write the code for dealing all this damage. So first up, calculate angle for knockback. So we would say var angle equals point direction from the perspective of the attack coming in. Then apply the knockback. So now the real question is, does the player have those knockback variables? Don't think we ever gave the player those knockback variables. So we're going to need to add in move underscore knockback X and move underscore knockback Y. Should have been a period there. All right, so now we have our move knockback variables. So move underscore knockback X is equal to, again, componentizing a vector, length direction X of the other knockback and the angle that we just computed. Move knockback Y will be the same thing, but the Y version. Then we want to apply damage. So the damage is stored on the manager, if we recall. Manager.stats HP minus equal other.damage. Apply stun effects. So stunned equals other.stun time. And, oh, that's right, that's stored on the, the second question is, do we have stun? So I don't believe we're storing that on the manager. That wouldn't make sense to store on the manager. Yeah, we don't have that there. So I think we would probably want to store that on the player. So we could put stunned, do stat stunned. We want to mimic what we've been doing. And then we could do stat hurt. So exactly like how the enemy works. Then lock the hurt animation. Or unlock animation. So anim locked is false, and then attack enabled is true because we just got interrupted from our attack. And then add this hit to the list of things that has hit us. So ds underscore list underscore add already hit other.id. So that's the changes to our collision. Now we do need to apply the knockback. So that's actually really easy because we've already set all this up. So here inside of my step event, we've got to apply some of that. So if did we even make the hurt animations? No. Oof. So if stat hurt is greater than 0, then we want to apply animate 0, 0 animation state hurt. If stunned is less than or equal to 0, allow movement. And then we want to use that hit flash that we had. So this will just automatically detect if we need a hit flash. And we have that method for movement knockback that automatically computes our knockback. So almost done with this. So we just got a few more maintenance things to take care of inside of end step. And actually, we could steal this directly from the enemy just to save us some typing. So we actually want to take this um, stat stunned and hurt stun and hurt timers and just take those and put them inside of player. We want to put those inside of player's end step right before we check health. Now, at this point, we should cross our fingers and give it a play test. We don't have a hurt animation, so that's going to not work out too terribly well, so we won't get the hit flash. But we do get knocked back, and we can't move during this knockback period. That's kind of funny. It would knock us to the blob if given the way that the if we're super close, it'll knock us to the blob. That's something to consider fixing, maybe. So it works. The only other thing I could think to do is add in a circle so we can see the attack range of the enemy. But other than that, the only thing I need to do is actually add in the hurt animations, and I'll do that in between videos. We've added so many animations over the course of this that I think we can handle it. So you'll need to add in the hurt animation for the player. I'll do one real quick. So we want to, I'm just going to duplicate a player thing. So I'm going to duplicate this. This is going to be called hurt down. And the one that I want to use for this, so I'm going to import, we're going to go over to the player. So we don't have, I didn't pull off one of them, so we're going to have to pull it off the sprite sheet. So we're going to take the 64 by 64 sprite sheet and edit that. So the hurt one is right here. So we just want to use that. So we would need to go to image, convert to frames. Now we've got to pick out that one. So that's going to be kind of tricky. Let's zoom in on this. And this is the one that's facing down. So this is 64 by 64. Let's click on horizontal cell offset to go across. So we want 5. And then the top 4 don't have a thick black outline. And I don't think we are using a thick outline on our player. So we want to use the top ones. And so I want to pick... Oh, wait, I'm sorry. These are all the no outline ones. So we just go down to this one. So horizontal offset 5, vertical offset 4, and that's the down facing one. And so you just repeat this process for all the remaining ones. And I'll do that in between videos. And so we have our hurt frame there. And we would just have to remember to add it into the hurt animations here when we're done. So that way the player can get all those called. So you can probably stop watching here, but I'll go through and I'll work those out just so that you can kind of, if you have any issues with the settings, you can just kind of watch the rest of this. but there's going to be nothing new at the end of this video. So thank you for watching, and good luck with configuring the monster attack. That's definitely been a tricky endeavor that we've been doing. All right, so we're doing the up animation here. So player hurt up. We're going to go back to, I guess import. We'll re-import that sprite sheet. Go to edit image, image, convert to frames. So I want the up one this time. And the up one is the bottom one here. So 5, 7, and hit convert. Now we want to duplicate. Let's do right. Same process. But I think I accidentally made my mistake that I always make. When I duplicated it, I forgot to double click it. So this one's called down, but it really should be called up. So I got to do like the switcheroo here. Renaming things is so much fun. All right, just remember to double click these things. So we want to go back to import, load the sprite sheet, edit the image, convert to frames. And as long as we don't close the editor, it remembers like most of the settings. So we want to go to the right facing one, which is 5, 5. And then we've got that. Duplicate. We want the left one now. Remember to double click it. Import. Edit. Convert to frames. And I think this is going to be 6. All right, so that's good. We just need to then add it into the list of frames. So I'm just going to copy and paste this one. Oops. Paste it into here, and then just rename these to hurt. And now I've got all of my sprites. And let me sneak one more change in here while we're at it. I wanted to add another debug line on this draw here. I wanted to add one for the attack range. And this would be for attack melee range. All right, so let's see if we get the hit effect on the player. We should get our flashing hit because that was actually tied to having hurt frames. And we don't keep the player stunned for a while so that we don't get stun locked, because we are asking ourselves to get stun locked once we get to move to enemies in there. We could very easily just get cornered and stun locked. Oh, is that an interesting bug? Was I able to attack when I was down? We'll have to definitely fix that in the next video. So yeah, that's a bug for the next video. All right, well, thank you for sticking around for the extra 5 minutes of setting all that up. And I will see you in the next video when we actually start making the air elemental. So thanks for watching, and thanks for staying around for the extra part.